Welcome back to TMZ Live. A very critical report just released today. 500 pages, and this is California Governor Gavin Newsom's task force on reparations for African Americans. He formed this task force to explore should there be reparations, and if so, how much. Seems very clear from the report that was released today that they are saying there should be reparations, and now it seems to me like they are making their case for exactly why there should be reparations. And I don't think there's quite yet a dollar amount, but this is leading up to that. So the chair of that task force is Kamilah Moore. The governor appointed her, and she is joining us now to discuss this report. Kamilah, welcome to TMZ Live.
Thank you for having me. Just a quick note, the Speaker of the State Assembly, Anthony Rendon, appointed me, but California Governor Newsom appointed some other people on the task force, as well as the Speaker of the State Senate.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor. Can you kind of give us a top line here on what the conclusions of this report show?
So the report is 13 chapters, almost 600 pages long, and it's been an honor and a privilege to co-supervise the release of this monumental interim report alongside my esteemed colleagues. So again, this is a year-long effort, and this report chronicles the harms against the African-American community, starting with the original scene of the crime, which is the transatlantic slave trade, moving towards the institution of U.S. chattel slavery, emancipation and the broken promise of Reconstruction that followed, to genocidal Jim Crow era, to the contemporary harms, right? So in fact, this is the most extensive government-issued report on the African-American community since the Kerner Commission in 1968, which was commissioned by President Lyndon B. Johnson. So again, this report catalogs the harms against the African-American community, and it exceeds the expectations in substantiating the clear claim for reparations for the African-American or American freedmen community on the municipal, state, and even federal level.
And hear what you're saying about municipal, state, or federal level. This has not been addressed yet federally. So California sort of, out in front of this, and I would imagine could become a model where in other states where they discuss this. Is the conclusion of the task force at this point that there absolutely should be and will be reparations paid in California?
Yes, absolutely. That is the conclusion. And in the report, which is 13 chapters, as I said, each chapter has a California breakdown that clearly demonstrates the state of California and the localities within it, complicity to maintaining the institution of slavery and the afterlife of slavery, the contemporary harms against the African-American community. And in each chapter, there's also a national breakdown that clearly demonstrates the federal government's role and responsibility, and of course, maintaining the institution of slavery and its afterlife as against this particular community, that being the African-American or American freedmen community. So yes, the conclusion is reparations now.
As you were speaking, I was thinking, I want to ask this, and it seems like it's probably too broad a question for too little time, but how have you concluded, or did you conclude in the report, who might be eligible, what the criteria is, and then how much money that you assign to it?
So to answer your second question first, we have not finalized what compensation might look like, but we have hired 5 economists to serve on our economic consultant team that will help us with that effort. But to answer your first question, yes, we did as a task force determine who would be eligible for reparations, and we determined it would be those who have a particular lineage. So African Americans who are descendants of American chattel slavery, or those who are descendants of free Black people living in the United States prior to 1900. That is the eligibility standard that we as a task force decided in March at a 5-4 historic decision.
So you've identified what group would be eligible. Is there also an element of this that will help citizens determine whether or not they are in that group?
So in the preliminary recommendations that is in the report that was released today, you'll find one recommendation is that the state of California create, the Office of African American Affairs, similar to maybe the Office of Tribal Affairs or Office of Immigrant Affairs. So that Office of African American or American Freedmen Affairs, within it would be, for instance, an Office of Genealogy, where we would hire professional expert genealogists to help the community of eligibility demonstrate their eligibility in the event that they need help, because the argument and understanding is that that burden shouldn't necessarily be placed on the individual, but should be placed on the state as acknowledging the harm.
Finally, now that the report's been written, what is the timeline for coming up with the formula of who gets the money and how much? What's the next step?
The California Reparations Task Force, it's a 2-year effort. We first started meeting in June of last year. So June 1 marks the first year of our report, where I characterize it being the study phase. The next phase will be the development phase, where we're having substantive conversations as a task force about what does reparations look like? What does compensation look like? We have another report that's going to be released next year in July. That will be our final report. That'll include a conversation about the community of eligibility. Will include conversations about compensation. Will include the final recommendations to be sent to the California legislature for reparations that must comport with international human rights law standards.
Wow, this is a monumental thing. I remember the Kerner Commission report. This is really monumental. Congratulations.
Thanks so much, Harvey and Charles.